Resourceful Designer, episode 57, We or I, choosing a voice for your design business.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now, your host, he preferred CompuServe to AOL, Mark DeCote.
Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm so happy that you've joined me today as we discuss our graphic design business. Now, I have an interesting topic to discuss with you today as we discuss whether or not we or I should be used on your marketing material. But before I get to that, I just want to see, how are you doing this week? I would love to hear from you. Drop me a note sometime. Let me know how your business is doing. Even better yet, join the Facebook group at resourcefuldesigner.com/group. I would love to hear from you there. Now, I've had a really busy week this week, both with work and with new jobs coming in. This week, I picked up a new website to do. I picked up a poster to do, a couple of magazine ads, a couple of banner ads, and I just finished quoting on a really interesting project, which is a billboard. Actually, it's a series of billboards, and I haven't done billboards. It's been a few years since I've actually designed a billboard, and they're really interesting because you've only got a few seconds to capture the attention of somebody driving down the road. So you have to have your message put out there very precise, using as little words as possible. And this is an interesting project because they already have the billboard place. They know where the billboards are going to go up, and they've actually bought a pair of billboards that are, I'd say, a couple of 100 meters apart. And what this company wants to do is they want the first billboard that the people will come across to ask a question, and then the second billboard will answer the question. But each one of them has to stand on their own, just in case the people don't see both billboards. So whenever it asks the question, it has to be the type of question that will let you ponder, but you don't necessarily need to know the answer. And then the answer has to be something that if you just read the answer without knowing the question, you'll still get something out of it. So it's an interesting project. I'm just quoting on that one. I don't know if I have it yet, but it would be fun to work on. As I said, I haven't done a billboard in a long time, and it would be fun to put another one of those in my portfolio. But that's enough about what I'm up to right now. So let's move things right along and get into the resource of the week. Now, this week's resource is a website called FontPair. It's fontpair.co. And what FontPair is it helps designers pair Google fonts together for use on websites or for anything you're doing online. Well, basically, it's a gallery of font combinations. Now, not every combination is there. That would be a multitude. I can't even imagine the calculation on how many that would be. But it does show enough of them to help you narrow down your searches and choose the right fonts for the site you're working on. Now, it has them divided up where you can view everything. Or if you already know that you want, say, a serif font for your headings and a sans serif for your body, or a sans serif for your heading and a serif for your body, or maybe a cursive serif or a cursive and a sans serif combination, it allows you to choose that. You choose one of the menus and you can pick which combination you want to view, and then you look at the different fonts, and then when you find one you like, you just go into whatever program you're using or whatever method, and you choose those Google fonts. So it's a really good site. As I said, it doesn't list all the fonts available because there's lots of fonts available through Google Fonts, especially combinations of fonts, but it does show you some really good pairings for you to either choose right out or give you an idea of where to go for what you want to do. So once again, that website is fontpair.co. And now our main topic, which is choosing we or I for the voice of your design business. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but every time I come across a URL for a graphic designer, whether I see it on their Twitter, I see it on their Facebook, I see a business card, anywhere I see a website listed for a graphic designer, I just have to go take a couple of minutes and check out their website. I mean, we're such creative people. And I love seeing the variety in the different approaches we take when it comes to our business, in displaying our skills, and in our communication. It's so refreshing to see the wide variety, as I said, of websites that are for designers. So I never not take the opportunity to go visit one. Every person who's joined the Facebook group, I've probably gone in and explored their website just to see if I was able to find it. If they listed it in their profile or something, I was able to go find their website, and I did take a look at it. Now, besides looking at the structure of the site, and reading, of course, the about page. I love reading the about page to find out about the designer. And of course, you can't go to a graphic design website without looking at the portfolio. But one of the other main things that I look at is the voice that was chosen for the page. And when I say voice, what I'm talking about is whether the site uses we or I in their copy. Now, whenever I see one that says we, and they go about we did this or we or us, I always play a little game. And if it does use that pronoun, I try to figure out, is this site, is this whoever business, is it really a we, or is it in fact an I or a me? Now, recently in the Facebook group, Ben, who is a new member, shared a link asking for feedback on his newly launched design website. Now, one of the first things upon loading his website that I noticed was he had a beautiful splash screen with a welcome message, and under the welcome message was a button to click that said, "What we do." Now, my first thought was that Ben decided to go with the we pronoun, the plural route, and make himself seem bigger than he actually is. However, in this case, I was pleasantly surprised when I visited Ben's About page and saw that the business is actually comprised of Ben, the designer, and Nick, the project manager. So in this case, Ben using the pronoun we was the right choice. But today, I'm not talking about this type of situation, businesses like Ben and Nick's, because in most cases, as home-based graphic designers, you're running your business all by yourself. And choosing we as your pronoun doesn't necessarily reflect the business it's trying to describe. But does that mean it's wrong to choose we on your website? What exactly is the best pronoun for your graphic design business? First, let's look at the hard decision between choosing we or I. Now, if you're all by yourself and you choose we, do you think that's misrepresenting yourself? Will it make a difference to potential clients? What are they expecting of you and your business when they see we and us all over the site or your marketing material? I keep talking about websites, but it could be any of your marketing material. And the other question you have to ask is, are clients willing to spend more for a we as opposed to an I? Now let's look at each one individually. We'll start off with we. So choosing we for your business. What exactly does it mean? Well, first off, if you've ever worked with partners or subcontractors, or you have people that you farm stuff out to, which is technically a subcontractor, then you aren't really misrepresenting your business if you say we. You could always simply explain that, yes, I have a team that I work with. They're not employees, but they're people I can turn to for any part of any project. And that's who I encompass when I say we. And that is a very legitimate reason. Now, another good thing about we is automatically, whenever somebody sees that, it makes your business feel more established. If there's a we involved, then it makes you sound bigger. It makes you sound more corporate, which could appeal to some clients, especially some bigger end clients, because some clients may prefer working with companies over an individual person. So to those people, when they see a website and they see we and us, it might be a lot more appealing to them. By creating this vision of a larger organization, you also dispel the stereotype of you being some fly-by-night designer, possibly sitting on the sofa in your underwear, laptop in hand, typing away, coding a website, while eating chips and popcorn. A lot of people, that's what they envision when they say a home-based graphic designer working by himself. That's what they see. Now, of course, that's not always the case, although sometimes it is the case, but that's beside the point. Whenever you say we, that stereotype disappears because they automatically believe you're a team of people. Now, that could run into problems if you do use we on all your stuff, and say a case where a client wants a job done and needs something specific. And say in this example, you are hired to do a job and it requires some sort of illustration, and you're not an illustrator. You're a designer. You do all sorts of stuff. I'm basing on myself. I'm not an illustrator. So say I had to hire an illustrator for a job, and there's something the illustrator provides the illustration. There's something about the illustration that the client, they want to work on a certain part of it or whatever. And the client says, well, let me talk to the illustrator. It'd be a lot easier for me to explain my stuff directly to him. Well, now you're in a position where, this illustrator is somebody that you've hired to do it for you in, passing on to the client. Do you want the client talking to the illustrator? Well, if you've put yourself off as a team, we're a we, yes, I have illustrators working with me, the client might automatically think, well, you're part of your team. I want to talk to that team member. And that could run into problems. I mean, maybe you have no problems with the client talking to the illustrator, but in some cases you might not want the client because, the client might say something, whatever. It's like, I'm paying X amount of dollar for this illustration. The illustrator's thinking, well, I'm only being paid this amount of dollar, or you never know. So you might not necessarily want the client to talk to the illustrator for that situation. Now, let's look on the other side. If you're choosing the pronoun I for your business, or me, but on the website, it would usually be I. Now, the biggest return for using I is that it focuses more on you instead of the business. Now, this makes you automatically sound more personable and accessible, which could be a very good thing. Now, it could also be a bad thing because if the client thinks you're so accessible, and especially if you're a home-based graphic designer, that might mean clients will think, well, he's at home. I might as well call him at 8, 9 o'clock at night. I'm sure he'll be there. He'll pick up the phone. So there is that drawback to it, but it does make you sound more personal. It's somebody that they think they can contact. Now, if the client is also happy, like say you do a project for a client and he's happy with your work or she's happy with your work, you and not the company get the credit for it. If you are passing yourself off as a we, as a team, chances are the client will view you that way. Even though they're only talking with you, they'll view it as a team and then they'll start promoting the business, which don't get me wrong, that's not a bad thing. You want people to promote your business. But if you're putting yourself off as an I, as an individual, chances are when they refer to somebody, they'll be talking about you and not your business name. I know in my case, whenever people refer to me, I'd say 90% of the time, the people that call me up looking for work have no idea what my business name actually is because somebody else that referred them told them they have to call Mark Decote and gave them a phone number or something, and they called me. They don't know what my business name is, but if I was a we and I put myself off as a team, that might not be the situation. So that's one of the benefits is if you yourself want to be known, using the I might be better. Now, you've heard me talk many times about creating relationships with clients. It's one of my big mandates, if you want to call it, of being a graphic designer. You have to create relationships with your clients if you want to succeed. Now, in using I in your marketing copy, that's the first step in building that relationship. Because when people view your marketing material, whether it's your website, a brochure, or whatever you do, it automatically establishes a connection directly with you from the start. Before they even talk to you, they've already established a connection and that relationship is being built. If you're using we, not so much the case. You can still build upon that relationship, but whenever they're first seeing the stuff, there's not that same personal connection as using I. Now, using I creates a sense of flexibility. It gives a sense of ease to the clients who believe that as an individual, you'll be more open to listening to what they have to say instead of, say, dictating like a company might do. Some people might be intimidated working with a company, and when they see we on your website, that might be what they think of, where working with an individual feels much more comfortable to them. Now, as I said, using I will attract those clients who want to deal with a person rather than a company, which also helps them because they know that the money they're spending is going to you. It's benefiting you, and it makes them feel good about spending the money because they're giving it to somebody that they've started a relationship with. Where if they're hiring a company, sometimes the money, they start thinking about the money and saying, well, I'm sending this to company, and then I don't know what happens once the money goes to the company. How does this money get distributed? And this is all stuff that, after the fact, once you build the relationship, whether you use we or I, people will start to get to know you and then it all works out. But it's just at the beginning when people are looking to hire somebody, it's things that might go through their mind. If they would prefer talk to an individual knowing that so-and-so is getting my money, it makes me feel better as a client knowing that that person is getting my money, as opposed to paying my money to a huge company, maybe not even a huge company, just a company, and not knowing the person that I'm dealing with, not knowing how much of my money they're actually getting. That might affect some clients' decisions on who they hire. So it's just something to keep in mind. And then there's also the fact that people who are not familiar with graphic design, or just say people that are starting a business and they might not have a big budget, they might automatically think that as an individual, you'll be more affordable than hiring a design firm. Now, we know that's not always the case, because design firms and individuals, a lot of times they can charge the same. When I left the printing company, I was charging the exact same rate that the printing company had. And in fact, now I know I charge more for my services than if somebody went to the printing company, where at the printing company, there's four designers there working now. And I'm an individual, but I charge more. But it's the perception. People will automatically think that if you go to an agency or some place that has a lot of people, it's going to cost you a lot more than if you go to an individual. So that's something else to keep in mind. Now, the last thing about using I is your clients will also be more flexible to your personal needs. In last week's question of the week, I mentioned how clients sometimes will be very accommodating in times when you have family emergencies and you have to take time off. If you have to leave for something, clients will understand. Whereas if they hired a company, they would expect, if the person they're working with, which is you, and it's a quote unquote company because you used we, the client may think, well, that person may be gone, but maybe they'll find somebody else to work on the project, which is what happens. I mentioned last week, if you hire an agency and something happens to that designer, the client just expects that the agency is going to pass the work on to another designer and the work's still going to get done. But as an individual, if something happens, there's some sort of family emergency or something, clients are very accommodating. And as I mentioned, I've had it many times where I had like a hard deadline and all of a sudden something came up, some tragedy or emergency or something. And I just said, sorry, I can't work on today or whatever. Take your time, Mark. Don't worry about that deadline. We can push it off. You take care, families first. That's the sort of thing when you build a relationship, and as an individual, clients will understand that a lot more so. So those are kind of the differences between using we and I. Now, other things to consider in your choices is, of course, your company name. If your company name is something like Mark Decote Design, then it kind of automatically lends suit to using I. It would be kind of strange if I said Mark Decote Design, we, this, us, and people are saying, well, who's this us? Who's this we? Isn't it Mark Decote? Now, if you have a company name, like in my case, my company name is Marksman Design. Marksman Design can go either way. I can say at Marksman Design, I do this, 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 or at Marksman Design, we do this, this, this. So either way works. And it's just a preference on what you want to do. Now, if your name has the word agency in it, then it's automatically a we, or anything like that. If you have like firm, like design firm or whatever, or say something like if your name has partnership or whatever, if your name somehow reflects that you are larger, then you have to use we. Like if your name is something like, Two Brothers Design Studio, well, of course it's we, because you're two brothers. You're not an individual. That would seem really strange if you use the pronoun I for that business. So those are situations where it's kind of an automatically use one or the other. Now, how do you become more personable? Like I said earlier, if you're using I, you become much more approachable, much more personable. And whenever you're using we, you sound much more corporate and more established. So how do you become more personable whenever you do use we? Well, in some cases, like say I used the example at the beginning of Ben and Nick. They're a partnership. Well, using we in their situation is the right choice. But there are still ways for them to make it more personable. Maybe instead of using we or us, they can use their names. So say something, instead of saying, give us a call, say, give Ben and Nick a call. Or we look forward to working with you can be changed to Ben and Nick look forward to working with you. Now, you may need to change your writing style from first to third person to pull this off, which I'm not going to get into now. That's a whole other podcast. But changing it so that your names are there does make it more personable. The other thing you could do is, in a case where you're a partnership or all that, maybe you want to give a face to your marketing. Like in Ben and Nick's case, Nick's the project manager and Ben's the designer. Maybe one of them wants to take the forefront. Maybe Nick just likes managing the projects, but he doesn't really want to deal with clients and all that. He wants Ben to do it. In that case, Ben can say something like, Nick and I look forward to working with you, or contact Nick and I, and write the whole marketing piece from Ben's perspective. That's another way to be more personable. So little things like that to keep in mind. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. I just want you to know what are some of the options to choose, because I've seen it both ways where people say I, people say we. And it's funny, a lot of times when I see we, I'll actually reach out to the designer and I'll just say, like, is it truly a we or is it just you? And sometimes they'll say, well, it's a we because, I use these people. I have these other people that help me out all the time. So I decided to use we, which is legitimate. Or I thought it made me sound bigger or whatever. Again, all legitimate reasons. Now, what do I use? I personally use the pronoun I. And you can probably guess just by the way I structured this podcast that I was leaning more that way. But that's just me. Yes, I operate under a business name, but call me selfish. When all is said and done and the work is presented to the client, I want people to remember me for the work, not necessarily my company name. I don't mind that people refer to Mark Dakota. Give Mark Dakota a call. I don't mind that. I'd much rather have somebody say, give Mark Dakota a call than give Marksman Design a call. Now, I would love for Marksman Design to be just as well known, but to me, I am the one running my business. I am the face of the business, regardless of who I use as a developer, as an illustrator, as a copywriter, as whatever. I am the face of my business, so I use the pronoun I. And as I said, it's all about building relationships. And when it comes to building relationships, as far as I'm concerned, that's all me. There's no we involved. I am the one building the relationship with the client, so that's why I chose I. But as I said, you probably got that impression from the rest of the podcast, just the way it was structured. I was kind of leaning towards that way. But that's just me. Now, as I said, there's nothing wrong with choosing we as your pronoun. In fact, there's a lot of cases where it does work. There's a lot of situations where people say by using we, you are actually able to attract larger companies or stuff. Like some of the big Fortune 500 companies might not necessarily go to a individual designer. They'd much rather go to an established design firm and hire them as opposed to an individual. So a lot of people try to make themselves feel bigger in order to attract those bigger clients. Maybe not a Fortune 500 client, but when you're looking at projects in the $10, $20, $50,000 range, they are hoping that by making themselves seem bigger, they will attract those clients more. And if that's what you're up to, then great. And if it works for you, that's amazing. I love that. And I'd love to hear about it. But I'm not necessarily going for those big clients, those $50,000 jobs. I'm happy to get the smaller and get more of them and create those relationships with people that last a long, long time. So that's what I'm going for. And that's what I use I. But as I said, there's really no right or wrong way to do it. I just wanted you to know what different options and different ways for you to go. Now, I would love for you to tell me, what's your take on all this? Do you use I? Do you use we on your marketing material, and why? You can leave me a comment in the show notes for this episode. Just visit resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 57 and leave a comment there. Or if you're part of the Facebook group, just leave me a message in Facebook. Or you can always hit me up via email at feedback@resourcefuldesigner.com. Now, normally at this point of the podcast, I would get to the question of the week, but I am running a little late on producing this, and I'm going to forego the question of the week this week. But I do want your questions. Please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/feedback to submit your question for me to answer on a future episode of the podcast. I was looking at my mailbag and it's getting pretty sparse in there. I don't have a lot of questions left. So now's your chance. If you want something answered, please submit your question and I would love to answer it, give my feedback, give my take on it on a future episode. And it can be about running your design business, dealing with clients, anything you want that has to do about graphic design and running the business. Just go ahead and ask. And if it's not a suitable question for the podcast, I'll respond to you personally and let you know. But in the meantime, in lieu of a question, maybe I can ask you for a iTunes review. I would love to get more reviews on iTunes. It helps people when they're looking for the podcast. They read through these things and it helps them decide on whether this podcast is a good fit for them. So if you are interested in leaving me an iTunes review, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/iTunes, and that'll take you directly to my page. Now, just on a side note, there's another thing with iTunes is the rankings and the searchability of the podcast has to do with the number of subscribers. So if by chance, and this is entirely up to you, if by chance you are not subscribed via iTunes, if you're subscribed through some other way, or if you go to the website and you listen on the website, It would be a huge help if you just went to iTunes, clicked on the subscribe button, and then once you subscribe, if you want to unsubscribe afterwards, that's fine, and listen to it whatever way. But every time somebody clicks on that subscribe button, it boosts the rankings for the podcast. So anyways, that's something I've never asked for before, but I thought I'd give it a shot this week. Now, once again, I'm not sure what next week's podcast topic will be about. I've got a few different things brewing in my head of what I'm going to talk about, but I'm just not sure in what order I'm going to put them out. So I'm not going to give you an idea right now. But whatever it turns out to be, I'm sure it'll be a great one. In the meantime, please share this podcast with any fellow graphic designer that you think would find it useful. Join the Facebook group at resourcefuldesigner.com/group and check out this week's resource of the week, which was fontpair.co. Until next time, I wish you all the best in your graphic design business. As always, I'm Mark DeCote, reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.